For those watching this session as a recorded item, well, hi, I'm Ajeeth Francis. Once the live students start coming in, I will sort of introduce myself again. This session is going to be about the things required to sort of get to a master's program abroad, specifically the US. I will talk about why my focus is predominantly the US in a bit, why the US makes a lot of sense. That will be the main item of discussion, well, in today's session. We're going to wait for the others to come in. So again, if you're watching this recorded, make sure you scrub to the point where I start talking about the content of discussion itself. See you there. All right. So let's talk about what this session is going to be about. Again, for those who are watching this um, as a recorded session, we are going to talk about some profiles of those who made it, right? Who made it into that dream of um, getting into a good school or college abroad, what it took for them to get there. We're going to talk about what colleges look for, right? So, what your application checklist should contain. We're going to talk about, well, the documents you need. We're going to talk about details of all aspects of your application, right? So things like a statement of purpose, letter of recommendation, and all of those things. We're going to also talk about things like, how we could get scholarships, what kind of cost we're looking at, how to shortlist, the right universities for you and right programs for you. We're also going to look at, like I said, we're going to look at the profiles, and we're going to see how that relates to success post completion of these programs, and that is a very important consideration because these programs tend to be quite expensive, as is education in general when it comes to a master's. We're also going to sort of talk about, in the passing, as to why looking at a master's abroad, specifically places like the US, makes sense if you're looking at a few specific things for your career. Either, if you want to take your career to the next level, get on a trajectory when you're going to the next level, and you want to fast track your progress. It also gives you that opportunity of exploring spaces and exploring new frontiers that you may not get locally, because we are still not at the cutting edge as places like the United States is. Also, the point of how getting into the best universities in India, right? There are very good universities and colleges in India, but the odds of getting in is very, very small because the acceptance rates for these colleges is very, 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 very small. Whereas if you look at the US, you have a lot of great universities, great colleges, even government-funded colleges, where the acceptance rate is not that hellish, right? You can get into these colleges with the odds not looking too bad, and these are great colleges. You get good sort of placements post completion of these courses, and therefore it makes a lot of sense to look at this as an option if you're in crossroads, either if you're in your undergraduation right now, let's say you're in the second or third year, and you're thinking about what you want to do next and you're not sure. Think about the US as an option. It makes a lot of sense. You could look at other countries as well, and we will sort of touch upon that. But again, I'll talk about why US and why the focus on that specifically as we go forward. So let me get right into it. Let me talk about what we are doing today, right? Before which, a quick introduction about myself. I'm Ajeeth Peo Francis. I have been teaching for the GRE. I've been coaching students to get into universities abroad for the last 13, 14 years. I've been doing a lot of other things as well. As I've grown in my career. For example, I was previously the head of innovation for a edtech startup. I was essentially the CEO of the company where it was not big enough to have a CEO. I was also the national head of Kaplan India in 2016 to 2019 period, when Kaplan was still in India. I have taken the GRE and GMAT myself. I've scored at 99th percentile. I have not studied abroad specifically. I have done a program with the Cambridge University, but that's based out of India. Um, but I have done an MBA and a few other things that sort of helped me grow in my specific field. I've over the years taught about 10 to 20,000 students. I lose track of the number of students. You lose track after a while, and I've mentored a lot of high performing candidates. And by high performing, I don't necessarily mean students who've gotten great scores, but students who've made it really well in their careers because of the choices they made. And there's a combination of things that makes them great at it. And I'm going to talk about that now. And have a quick sip of water before I go forward. Right. So let's look at a few instances of these students or profiles who made it big, right? And by made it big, I mean they're sort of living the dream, right? The sort of the study abroad dream and the career trajectory dream. This was one of my mentees or my students way back in 2019, if I'm not wrong. She had done the GRE some time back, but her scores were not good. It was around the 300s or a little lower than 300s, which is not a good score. So I coached her for the GRE, and I also helped her with identifying what she needs to do post her GRE. So her background at that point was that she had done BTech in Amity University. She was a data scientist at Camp Gemini, Bangalore, which is a good profile. But as with many companies in general, there was a lot of politics. There was, halting in growth, and the pay scales weren't that great. She was probably making about 4 to 6 lakhs a year. Again, not shabby, but it is not necessarily in line with the potential that she could reach for. So that's where the GRE and wanting to study abroad came in. So she did her GRE, got into Boston University. Again, not the most top-rated university, but it had a good program for data analytics. So she chose that program. She got in. While studying, while in her 2-year period, she did a research assistantship. She did a teaching assistantship. By the way, these two things are options available as a student. If you're a good performing student, you can help the lab or the research facility in your college. Be a research assistant to your professor, where you can help them with experiments and documentation and stuff like that, and you get a stipend for that. You could also be a teaching assistant, where you could help the teacher with sort of scheduling. You can take some of the subjects and teach it to juniors, stuff like that. And this, again, you either get a fee waiver, or you can get a stipend out of it. And a lot of bright students make sure they get these opportunities so that they can sort of offset the cost of their education abroad. And again, I'll talk more about what other financing options are there and why your fee structure need not be very, daunting. By the way, you start applying for this in the first or second semester. And by second semester, you'll have one of these in line if your academics is good. So post her MS in applied data analytics, she got a job with with a company in Boston, if I'm not wrong. So there she joined as a senior big data engineer, and she is a senior big data engineer right now. To give you context, she was making about 4 to 6 lakhs here, but her job role is valued at about $120,000 at least, for the role that she's doing now. And that's a huge jump with a substantial amount of leeway for growth in her future career, right? And this is something that she may not have had the options. She actually didn't have these options, or the kind of growth that she saw, where she was in the company that she was and in the places she was applying for. So this sort of fast tracked her growth and got her to a level where she might have required about 5 to 10 years to get to that level, right? So one of the biggest things that an MBA, no, I'm sorry, an MS abroad can do is sort of fast track your growth, as opposed to just working your way up there. Even in that case, you have to upskill yourself. You have to do specific certifications or whatnot. But even if you did that, you would still require about 5 to 10 years to get to that place. Whereas if you do an MS abroad, you could shortcut that within that 2-year period. And that's a huge advantage. She, by the way, scored a 319 on the GRE, which is a really, really good score. And when you look at where she started, she improved substantially. Right? There were a lot of hardships involved when preparing for the GRE. It's not necessarily a easy test. It's a very tricky test, but once you understand what it takes, it's fairly simple to get a reasonably good score. By the way, the GRE is scored at a maximum of 340. Anything above a 320 is considered a very, very good score, right? Most colleges will not turn you down based on that score alone, right? They may turn you down based on other things, but a 320 on the GRE is a really, really good score. Another candidate, another person that I mentored was Priyanka. Now, I don't have a picture because I've taken the pictures from LinkedIn. This is a picture she has on LinkedIn. So she did her BTech in VIT, Vellore Institute of Technology. You may or may not have heard of this college. It's not a top-rated college in the, it's not like in the top best colleges in the world. It is a good college. But what she did was she did a lot of, she published a lot of papers. She did a lot of research. She had a few, patent pending IP items in her kitty as well, right? So she was a very, very bright student. and she had been so since school. So she had a very good profile. What was holding her back again was specifically a GRE score. She had great credentials. She had a great letter of recommendations. A great SOP could be written for her because she'd done a lot of things in her life. Um, but what she didn't have was a great GRE score. She had a 310 or a 312 in her GRE. Again, not a shabby score, but for the colleges that she was looking for, that just didn't cut it. So what did she do? She trained with me. It took a month actually. Her biggest problem area was verbal, and we pushed her score to a 330 plus, a 331 to be exact. And that's a very, very, very good score. That's a 90th plus percentile score. Very few people get that score. Um, and with that, well, before getting into a proper 2-year program, she decided to take a break year, a gap year. She interned with Google. She got an opportunity where she could intern with Google. This was in Germany, in Munich. She did that, and all of that added to her profile. She got a full scholarship in Stanford University, a full scholarship. Um, Beyond that, she also got a research assistantship, which means she didn't pay fees, rather she got paid to study there, right? So yeah, so a great GRE score really sort of sets you apart from the rest of the applicants and puts you right on top in the sort of the selection pile. While that alone is not enough, you need a lot of other things. We will talk about that. But a very high GRE score can sort of seal the deal, if you know what I mean. The next candidate is Amitya, right? So Amitya is a different case. So he did his engineering in Peace University, and while he was in college, I met him at the time when he just graduated, and he told me how he did not necessarily like the scope that he had of being an engineer. He didn't want to be an engineer. He said that he had most fun when he was managing events, when he was going around getting funds for his college fests, you know. And he was very entrepreneurial that way, and he was very keen on marketing. He joined PwC as an analyst, if I'm not wrong. Um, this was related to the college degree he had. I think it was a college placement, and he absolutely hated it. He quit. He tried another job and another job, and then the conversation when he did finally meet me was, "Why don't you try, working in startups, explore the roles?" And he did. He did enjoy working in marketing. He worked with a few podcasts. Um, and he realized that again the growth potential was not there, and he realized that there's something missing, that he had to really slog for too many years to get to where he wanted to get. um, Meanwhile, he had already sort of been preparing for his GRE. He wanted to do something related to BTech, but then we realized that that's not the best course of action, because he was going to be miserable doing a good job in Bangalore. Then why would he want to sort of double down on that when he didn't really like it? So we realized that we had a GRE score. He had a 316. Again, not a very, very fabulous score, but it's a good score. And he applied for an MBA, and he did get it. And he specializes in marketing in this specific MBA college. And again, the placements there are really good for an MBA with or someone who is a marketing specialist could earn anywhere upwards of 120 to 140,000 dollars right out of college, right? And that's a huge change from the kind of salaries you'd be looking at if you sort of did jugaad here and started working with startups and whatnot. You're not going to be anywhere close to that pay scale. For reference, while you obviously can't directly convert US dollars to Indian rupees to understand how it scales, but you can't really look at PPP either, right? It doesn't give you a clear idea. So $120,000 salary would be equivalent to about 50 to 60 lakhs in Indian salaries, right? And it's really hard to get such jobs in India, especially right out of college, unless you're in an IIT or an IIM. And even there, it's not guaranteed, right? There are only the select few there who get such packages. Um, so yeah, it makes a lot of sense to look at, studying abroad as an option because of the options it provides and because of the growth potential you might have afterwards. So, looking at the numbers, this is data from the Ministry of External Affairs, looking at all of the students Indian students who study abroad, you'll realize that the USA is the biggest sort of place where Indians go to. And most of these tend to be MS and MBA grads, right? Um, Now, the numbers for Canada and Australia have increased over the years, but you'll realize that it is lower than that of USA. And I would not necessarily recommend Canada at this time unless you just want a degree in abroad and you have plans to come back to India. Um, I say that because there are not enough jobs in Canada at the moment to support the volumes of students they're taking in, right? And this is a big issue that is sort of coming up in the educational world. So I would caution you, do your research, make sure, if you're applying to Canada, apply to the best colleges. Don't apply to any college. It has to be the best college in Canada. And it's easy to find out what are the reputed colleges, what are not reputed colleges. Look at placement data, look at the percentage of the graduates who get employment afterwards. All this data is very important. So don't just apply to any odd college. In the US as well, you want to do the same thing, but the probability of getting into a college is much higher. The probability of getting a good college is also higher. But again, you have to research those things. You can't just get into any odd college. That can be disastrous, right? Um, Australia is also becoming a very sought after location. UK and Germany trailing in the end. But again, these are all big destinations for studying abroad. And again, this corresponds to opportunities available for Indians who go study abroad post graduation. So, if you want to study abroad, what are the things that you need to sort of be selected? Well, an admission committee will look at the following things when they look at a particular candidate, and I'll call this the profile, right? The profile. This will contain all of the following things. Um, Hi, Sandeep. Welcome. We're just talking about what it takes to get into a college abroad. So, colleges will usually look at something called a profile um, when they are trying to sort of understand whether a candidate is a good fit or not. So they look at something, they look at something called the SOP, which is a statement of purpose. I'll talk more about it. They look at something called the LOR, which is the letter of recommendation. They will look at standardized test scores, the GRE score or the GMAT score if you're looking for an MBA. And they'll also look for an English proficiency test, either the IELTS or the TOEFL. They will also, of course, look at your application. So for each college, you need to apply in their portal, and that application process will involve a lot of details that you need to fill in. And you may also have to write essays in that particular application itself, right? Again, I'll discuss all of these one after the other to give you an idea as to what it means to apply and what it takes to get into a good college abroad. So if you are looking to study abroad, right, this should be a checklist. These are the things you need um, to ensure that you get a call from the university that your application is complete. You will need to you will need a complete application form. So this, when you apply to a college, you will have to make sure that you've given all the details, that you've done everything according to what is instructed. So follow instructions very carefully. If you don't follow the instructions completely to 100%, your application will be rejected sort of summarily. Um, Ensure that you pay the application fee. As with any application in India or abroad, this is standard procedure. You will have to have your official transcripts, which is your college, your mark sheets essentially. But your college will give you a transcript. It's not the same as the mark sheet, but it sort of serves the same purpose. Um, if you're in your third year, you can sort of apply with whatever mark sheets you have, and you'll get sort of a conditional admit, right? And once you've completed your program, once you've got your 8 semester mark sheets, you can then send it to them and they'll confirm your admission. You will need something called letters of recommendation. Now, these come from either your professors or from people you've worked with, right? Depends. So maybe you interned somewhere, right? Maybe the person who was your manager or supervisor could write you a letter of recommendation. Maybe the HOD of your department or a teacher that you've worked with for a particular research or a project or whatever, right? This person can write about you. So this person has to write about specific aspects that make you a good fit for the particular program and the particular college, ideally. Um, Again, these are things that you can, you will have to discuss with the teacher or the person, and ensure that you inform them as to what kind of things they have to address. Your application and the website for the college will give you information related to this. You will also need to submit something called a statement of purpose. Now, statement of purpose is essentially an essay you write, um, where you talk about who you are, what your background is, academically and otherwise, why you are interested in the program that you're applying for, why you are interested in the college you're applying for, and also, more importantly, you should, without being very obvious, convey why you are a good fit for them, why they should select you, right? So the core purpose of the statement of purpose is to should sort of sell yourself, to make yourself look like a good hire or a good enrollment for them. But you do that by talking about yourself, what you've done, and why you're interested. What's your purpose, essentially. Very important. Many Indian colleges don't necessarily require this. For MBA, they do. But in the US, all MS programs require this. And this is a very important part of your application process, right? While your CGPA and your GRE scores are also important, statement of purpose is as important. I would say 30%. And then there is 10% of other sort of variables, right? You will also have to submit your CV, again, a very basic CV, and there's enough information out there to tell you how to make a CV that doesn't get you rejected, right? You need standardized test scores. There might be some colleges abroad, US and other colleges, which say that they don't require a GRE score. In fact, even top colleges have said that they don't require GRE score, but there's a catch with it. If it's a non-known brand college, then it's probably because they don't get enough admissions, right? That no one's applying to these colleges, and you really don't want to go and join a college which is like that. But if you look at your Stanfords and your Harvards, there is a clause which says you could apply without your GRE score, but that means that you're going to be competing on the basis of your CGPA and extremely on the basis of your statement of purpose, right? And people who are applying to such colleges will have amazing profiles, and you really don't want to compete on that regard. It'll handicap you. I'm sorry, it'll handicap you, right? So you want to make sure you have a stellar GRE score, so it looks like a shining badge that they'll immediately look at and realize that, okay, you know what, I want to pay attention to this profile, right? So do not skip the GRE if you're looking at an MS. If you're looking at an MBA, you want to do the GMAT. That's the better test. Colleges give preference for that, even though they do take GRE scores. I would recommend a GMAT instead of a GRE. You will also have to clear one of these standardized tests, or rather English proficiency tests, either the TOEFL or the IELTS. So you want to make sure that these will tell the admission committee whether you're proficient enough to speak English and understand English, so that you can sort of effortlessly make your way through the 2 years in college, right? Because it's going to be rigorous as it is, but if you don't understand the language, it's going to be much harder. And you might say, I studied in an English medium school, English medium college, but the US does not sort of recognize that for some reason. Um, so you have to take the IELTS. And it's also important for the visa process in a lot of cases. You also have to show financial proof, in that you need to show that you have enough money or you have the means to pay for your education. Again, you could get loans. That's an option, but there are other ways of funding as well. You could, you could show proof of funding through other means. And again, this is a conversation we'll have in much more detail later on. And of course, you will need your passport, right? And other identification doesn't really apply to us Indians, because the only government ID that they accept for any of these tests, whether it be TOEFL, IELTS, GMAT, GRE, the only government ID you need that's accepted is your official passport. Um, Now, when you're applying for these tests, let's say you're going to write your GRE or you're going to write the IELTS, you have to take your passport with you, the original, and it has to be valid. You can't take with you an expired passport. So I would recommend that if you're planning to write the GRE or the GMAT anytime soon, make sure you have enough validity. If it has less than 6 months validity, in fact, even if it has less than 1 year validity, I would ask you to go ahead and renew it, right? In fact, to be safe, it is if it has less than 3 years of validity left, renew it because think about it, right? You'll apply for your GRE with one passport, with the specific passport ID number, and if you're applying to the college with a different passport with a different passport number, it's just an inconvenience. You can skip the inconvenience, renew your passport, make sure it has enough validity so that you will never have to worry about that for a while, right? So, what plan can you have for your application? So, Sandeep, good to see you there. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Which year are you in, or are you working? Um, are you looking to study abroad? Give me a little bit of information about yourself, and you can type it down in the chat. Okay, I'll let you type it down. In the meantime, let me talk about the application planner, right? So, what you want to do is once you've decided that you want to study abroad, right? It's a good idea to research the kind of jobs available, the kind of specializations you want to do, and you want to get all of that in place. Um, it's a good idea to take a mock GRE test to get a rough idea as to where you stand. Right? This doesn't mean that this is going to be your final score, but it gives you a good idea as to where your score range is going to be. Great. You've currently started working. Great. Are you looking to study abroad, or what is sort of your motivation? All right. So write the GRE, a mock test to get a general idea. Once you've done that, make sure you sort of do research on the programs and courses. Don't just go by ranking. Um, Look at all the programs or all the courses and colleges that fit to your criteria, fit to the program that you're looking for. Research the areas. In the US, you'll realize that specific areas, like for example, the West Coast is related to manufacturing. And I think the East Coast is more about financial aspects of things, and I'm a little iffy on that. Research on where your specialization is and which location best suits you, and based on that, figure out which universities best fit your profile, right? Shortlist based on that. um, Planning to give GMAT, but mid-modern previous academics. Makes sense. All right, great. um, that's a great score. A GMAT 730 plus you're including IR, I think, right? So GMAT 730 is a really good score. And it's really hard to get that score these days. That's great, great then. Yeah. Um, yeah, and I think that score is a good score to apply to ISB as well. So good luck on that, right? Um, so what I'm talking about here again will sort of apply to MBA as well. I spoke a little bit about the sort of the factors that make studying abroad a good idea. Again, once the session is done, you can go back to the recording and sort of go through that as well, right? So again, this is relevant for MBA as well. Many of these things apply to both. So identify your colleges. Once that is done, you also want to sort of start laying down the groundwork for your SOP LORs. Again, like I said, an SOP is a statement of purpose. It's an essay that you write. It has to be unique to each college that you apply for. It cannot be one essay, which means you have to research the college. You have to research um, the specialization of each college. Some colleges might have finance as their biggest sort of um, their USP, or it might be technology based. So you want to ensure that um, you write an SOP keeping that in mind. So, right. So you do need to sort of give them all your academic scores. Your UG scores will be more important than your 10th and 12th. And again, in undergraduation, the key is that you don't have backlogs when you apply, right? I'm guessing all your if you do have backlogs, make sure they're completed. And 10th and 12th, as long as you have an above average score, let's say you have a 70% plus, that should be fine. Again, depends on the board that you studied in. Um, and UG, again, I'll show you some data on the kind of CGPA that colleges look at, again, the top universities, and that should give you an idea. For an MBA specifically, your work experience also becomes very important, especially abroad. And again, since you're looking at ISB, you're probably looking at executive MBAs as well. So those programs will give a lot of weightage to your um, to your to your work experience as well. Sometimes up to 50% of the application weightage might fall on your work experience and the related LORs and SOPs along with that. Um, so yeah, so for you, maybe the 10th and 12th grade scores are not that important. Your UG, WorkX, GMAT, GRE scores, and your LOR SOPs, those will be the ones that make or break the deal, right? Your GMAT score is great, so you want to focus on your profile and how your SOP is tailored to each of these colleges that you apply to, right? Yeah, and again, you can't do much about your UG score, but you should be able to get a good picture by looking at the profiles of the colleges. They will share this alumni data, and that usually shows the kind of CGPA, average CGPA of the incoming classes, and the average GMAT scores. It's a good indicator, right? It doesn't mean that if you get above that, you will get in. That's not what it means. Or that if you get lower than that, you won't get in. Again, not what it means. It's an average. So it's an indicator of what it could be. Um, so usually you'll realize that application, or that rather the intakes happen. And I don't think I spoke about this. So most of the intakes happen around you have your fall intake and your spring intake. So that's February and September. And the deadlines for that happen about a year in advance. So the previous year October and the previous year December. Um, Again, I'm talking about a 1 year gap, not if it's February, the application is not the previous year December. It's rather 1 year before that, right? So if you're applying to 2025, you want to make sure that you are um, starting your application process by this year, December, right? That's usually a good time. And again, a lot of these colleges, especially with MS, um, the earlier you apply, the better your chances are. Many colleges have a first come, first serve on the application intakes, right? They do it in 3 or 2 sort of slots. You want to make sure you get into the earliest slot, right? And again, it may not make a difference, but in some cases it does make a difference. So you want to eke out every bit of advantage that you get. So being early really pays, and it can give you an unfair advantage, right? Um, so when researching your university, you need to look for the following things. You need to make sure that the profile matches. What that means is that, like I said, you go to the once you've selected once you've figured out what are the range of universities you're looking at, what are the colleges that give you the program that you're looking for in the location that you're looking for, or around the location you're looking for, where all the big businesses are. Then you go ahead and look for these things. Look for what is the average GRE GMAT score, what is the kind of CGPA of the incoming class, and that can give you a good idea as to whether you're a fit or not, right? While it sounds good to apply to the best universities in the world, sometimes if your profile is not 100% in some of the aspects, you might want to look at other universities that may have great programs but may not have the highest ranking for the college, right? So that's something you want to look at, especially if you're looking at an MS, a master's in the US or any other country abroad. You also want to look at location, right? So you have to look at which location is right for you. Are you someone who is into manufacturing and production? Then you want to go to a location where the industries of that sort are populated, and the colleges there would have tie-ups with those industries. And that's how it works, so that your placements um, could be sort of easier, and you're more likely to get the kind of job that you want to get. There's also affordability, right? Is the fee plus living expenses within your budget? Again, this depends on the location. Places like Austin, Arizona, they tend to be not Austin. Places like Arizona tend to be not as expensive, but places like New York tend to be very, very expensive. So your range of living expenses could be from anywhere from $500 to $600 a month to all the way to $1,500 a month, even if you're living very frugally, living with other housemates. So you want to figure that out, right? But like I said, there are options where you could make money, especially if you're doing a master's, an MS, where you have research assistantship, you have teaching assistantship, and that sort of takes care of some of the burden. And of course, you could, depending on the state and depending on the laws there, you could take a part-time job as well after your second semester, if I'm not wrong. And of course, there are scholarships and other things related to your application that could give you a fee waiver. Again, this is usually given either on a need basis. If you can prove that you really need the fee help, then the colleges will give you that, or it could be based on merit, right? The top 10% of the applicants might get this kind of fee waiver or sponsorship. There's also, you also need to look at the acceptance rate. Um, Generally, if you look at the best colleges in India, for example, an IIMA, the acceptance rate is around I think it's 0.025 or 0.25. I forget the actual number. It's a very small number, right? It's 0.02 actually. Um, it- the acceptance rate is abysmal, right? I'm not saying anything about the college. It just says it's that exclusive. So the best colleges in India get to end up having a lot of competition, and it gets very hard to get into such colleges because they're very selective. They have to be. So usually the best colleges in India have at best a 1% selection rate or acceptance rate, and that's a very low number. Compare that to the top colleges in the US, and these are not small colleges. These are the top colleges. Like Harvard has an acceptance rate of 11%. When you look at all the programs, averaged out, and even their acceptance criteria, if you think about it, is not that insane. You need an average CGPA or a GPA, sorry, of 3.78, and usually the GRE scores that correspond are around 166 to 160, 166 in quant and 160 in verbal. This, like I said, is in that 320 plus score range. Again, for the top, the best colleges in the world, in the US, you want to get as high a GRE score as possible because it sort of puts you at the top of their review stack. But so it ensures that they will reject you for other reasons. They won't reject you for your GRE score, right? But you will get attention of the admission committee. Looking at a few other things, you'll realize that the tuition fees is usually in the range of about $30,000 to $40,000. This is per year, right? So again, your master's is 2 years. Again, depends. An MBA might be more expensive or less expensive depending on the college and the location you're looking at. Um, Again, to give you an idea, Arizona State University, it's a really good college, right? But look at the acceptance rate. It's really high. So, if you have a good application, if it's not rejected summarily, you're likely to get in. And the average salaries of people who graduate from, Arizona, um, is again in the range of $80,000 to $120,000 a year, unless you take a course that is unemployable, right? There are some courses that don't have job prospects, but if you're doing engineering, you are likely to get a job afterwards. And again, the placement percentages are very high in these colleges as well. So these are the numbers you need to be looking at. And when you're researching colleges, you want to pay attention to this to ensure that you are matching your profile with the kind of requirements they have. So a few things you should know. Master's programs are 2 year long in the US. In some other countries, they might be about 16 months long. Um, but that's not necessarily the rule. And again, even in the US, there are some programs you could fast track and finish faster. There are options to do that. This, of course, saves on money of your rent and even in tuition in some cases. But yeah, you will need to figure out the details for the colleges that you apply for that you're interested in. It varies, but in general, it's 2 years long. Deadlines are usually 8 to 10 months before the start of the program. So you want to keep that in mind. You don't want to rush and do everything at that point of deadline. You need to have a lead way, right? For example, your GMAT GRE preparation should start at least 5 to 6 months ahead so that you have enough breather room in case you need to re-strategize. Again, the tests like GRE have options like score select, where you could, pick and choose the scores you send to colleges. In a sense, if you did really well in one section of GRE, maybe you did really well in verbal, but didn't get the one score you wanted, you could take the GRE again, and whichever was the best score, you can send that specific score to the colleges. Some colleges even let you mix and match your score, so that's amazing, right? But you won't have that freedom if you panic and start preparing 1 month before your deadlines. You will need good recommendations. Again, this needs to add value to your application. It has to be someone who has worked with you, who knows your work, and can write something that's relevant to what the colleges are looking for. A templated letter of recommendation does not work, right? And definitely don't write the letter of recommendation yourself and ask your professor to send it from there. That doesn't work as well. And of course, SOP. Make sure you customize your SOP for each college that you're applying to. And this will ensure that you increase your odds of getting in as much as possible, right? So it's a combination of all of these things: applying early, applying to the right colleges, the right programs, knowing what is your best fit, and also conveying that message of why you're a best fit, along with a great GRE or a GMAT score, and of course your academic credentials, right? Many of you who are going to be watching this may not be at a state where you can change your academics too much, but again, if you have an average academic background, you can, of course, sort of prioritize your college list accordingly and also ensure that you get a really, really high GRE score and write an amazing SOP to offset that sort of negative, right? So, yeah, as long as you don't have an abysmal academic history, you should be fine. You could still apply to some good colleges and ensure that your career trajectory is in the right place. Um, so what are the elements of an SOP, a statement of purpose? This applies for both MBA and MS. So you need to introduce yourself, your background, provide your academic background, provide your professional experience, be it any research that you've done, be it any paper that you've written, um, or an internship that you've done, or if you have actually worked somewhere, write about that. It all has to tie into why um, you are applying to this particular program. It can't be random, it can't be off topic. It has to be tied into why you're applying to this particular college and why this particular school, right? It all has to be relevant to that. Which again takes me to suitability of the program. And of course, you conclude by sort of summarizing the points that you've written. More than the structure of the essay itself, what's important is the content and that it's relevant to what the admission committee is looking at. So think about this: an admission reviewer will look at hundreds, maybe even thousands of these statement of purposes, right? So you have to write a statement of purpose that connects to them, that they look at it and say, hey, we're looking for candidates like these, and we have to look at this candidate and sort of put him at the highest priority, right? So it has to sort of speak to them, and therefore it can't be a templated cookie cutter response. It has to be fine-tuned and sort of what should I say, tailored to the college and the program that you're applying for. So you could talk about things like, there are these campus activities that your college has, and these are things that I've been doing as well, so I could add more value to it. And you can talk about why it's not just about the grades, it's also about creating that network and how their alumni network is so powerful, and you can bring value to that as well. All of that works, right? So you have to tie it in with all of your experience and give evidence for what you're saying you've done. Let's look at the GRE now. The GRE is the most common requirement for standardized test when you're applying for the US, specifically for the master's program. Now, some MBA schools, some B schools also accept GRE scores. I think many of them do, but the preference tends to be the GMAT uh, for many reasons. I don't want to get into the logic of it, but you will realize that the GRE is more of a um, general logic test. The GMAT is more critical thinking um, oriented. So the test itself is slightly different, and that does reflect in the kind of candidates and the scores they're looking for. So looking at the GRE measures verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, analytical writing assessment, which is similar to what the GMAT does. Um, Preparation is key here, right? The GRE is not that difficult to test. When you think about it, you know, the questions or the question types it has is fill in the blanks, reading comprehension, and some critical reasoning. And these are stuff that you've done in like what, fifth standard. The concepts tested themselves are probably like stuff we've done in 10th standard. This is also true for math. Things like algebra, trigonometry. There's no calculus, there's no differentiation, integration, none of that. There is coordinate geometry, but again, at most 10th standard level math. So it's not very advanced. The way they test it is advanced, though, right? It's very tricky. And again, Sandeep, you'll know this because the GMAT is also like this. Um, so knowing what the test maker wants from you and understanding how to give them what they want, how to think the particular way, is a very important skill. So make sure you schedule your test in advance and you have a good runway to your test date. Don't just sort of panic and start preparing 1 month in advance. It does not work like that. But then again, you know, usually the preparation time is about 3 months, and it has to be very structured, very disciplined preparation, and also about a month or two of buffer where you take practice tests and sort of get the hang of taking the test itself, and that can be a different experience as well. So for those who are new to the GRE contains 3 sections. It has a quant, verbal, and AWA. The quant and verbal together give you your score out of 340, right? So 260 to 340 is the score range. A good score is anywhere in the I would say 312 to 320, but let me just say 320 plus is what you want to aspire for, right? This, by the way, is similar to a 700 plus on the GMAT. The AWS score is a separate section, is a separate score, right? If you get anywhere around 4.5 to 5, you're good. It's not very difficult to do this, and it's very straightforward how to do this. No, there will be discussions during the GRE prep that we will discuss. This is not that difficult a task to do. The GRE has been simplified, I think, from August, September. It's going to get much more simplified, which means it's going to be shorter, and they're getting rid of experimental sections. Essentially, these were a repeat of either quant or verbal with new questions, but it didn't add to your score, right? It's just for experimental purposes. They've gotten rid of that. So it's shortened the test quite a bit. And they've also removed one of the essays. There were 2 essays, there's just 1 essay. So it's a much more comfortable test to take compared to the previous or the current format, but it's still a very a tricky test, right? So you need to be prepared. You can't just go in blind. There are a lot of aspects to it that can trip you up. So what are the challenges? The GRE has advanced vocabulary, it has complex language. You also have a limited time, right? You're always under the pressure of time, and that can sort of skew your ability to make decisions. Um, and of course, stress and fatigue are also a big thing. More than anything, think about it, right? That score is going to make a huge impact in your life, and that itself can stress you out. Beyond that, the fact that, you know, each question is, you know, you're looking at the timer every time a question comes up, and the time is always running out. You just don't have enough time, right? And that's how it's designed. So you need to be very strategic about it, and you need to know exactly how to deal with each question that you might be thrown at. Let's look at an example, right? You have a minute. Try to solve this. Give me an answer. Type down an answer that you think is right. Try to solve it as quickly as possible. Your time starts now. All right. Any guesses as to what the answer is? So historically, I've heard answers ranging from 32 to 33. I've heard 63, 64, some very rarely 65, but usually it's in this range, right? For various reasons. And if it were a GRE test, those will be the options, right? But what is the right answer? Even if you got the right answer, by the way, you probably took a lot of time to get there. I'll show you what the GRE is about and why it's not as difficult as it seems to be. 34, all right, that's a good guess. I'll come to that. So the question says, in a knockout tournament, 64 teams, a team is eliminated after it loses, and the winner advances to play with other winners. How many games will it take to have one winner in the end? So traditionally, you'll say, you know what? There are two teams, they play against each other, then there is one winner, so two becomes one. Therefore, 32 teams will play against 32 teams. There'll be one winner, then 16 teams against 16 teams. Do I add this all up? It gets very messy, right? I don't like calculating so much. I don't like writing so much. So I'm going to just go ahead and erase all of that. And I'm saying that in response to solving questions on the GRE or any standardized test, right? The less I try to work out and do basic math, the better, because then I know I'm not falling for traps. Let me reword it. He's saying there are 64 teams and it's a knockout tournament, right? And what do we want? We want one winner. In other words, how many teams must lose for there to be one winner? Any idea? Remember, there are 64 teams. How many teams should lose for that to be one winner? And resoundingly, the answer is obvious. It has to be 63 because there are 64 teams, right? So you realize that that question was not really a math question. It was a logic question. It was in a lot of ways, it was a verbal question, right? It just wanted to, if you just summarize it and look at the crux of what it's asking you for, the answer is obvious. And that's the point. GRE is not about tough concepts. It does test concepts, of course, but it's very basic concepts. It sort of twists it around and portrays it in a way where it becomes complex, right? So you should build that ability to break it down into very simple logical units, and that's the skill we will be building in the sort of the program within academy, right? So if you have any doubts, make sure you let us know. I have pinned a comment on top, so I would encourage all of you to sort of click on that and sort of fill in your details so we can understand you better and we can get back to you with solutions to any problems you might have. And again, if you're watching this, do know that we offer a GRE program and we have great educators. I'm one of the educators, and I shouldn't be saying great educators and then following it up with I am one of them, right? It sounds very, very, immodest. But yeah, we have top educators. There are many versions of the programs available depending on your budget. The topmost provides one-on-one sessions as well. Again, the fees is from my research one of the best in the industry, so make sure you check it out. You can check out, click on the form, you will be able to see the links for the same, and make sure you don't miss it out. Sandeep, why don't you just fill in the form, click on GMAT in the interested program. I will have the team get in touch with you about the GMAT batch. I don't know the exact details, but there is a GMAT batch running, and you should sort of fill in the form. I'll let them know that you are interested. All right. So that brings us to the end of this session. Again, if there are any questions, anything you want us to get back to you about, and if you're watching this, not live, if you're watching this as a recorded session, make sure you fill in that form that's pinned in the comment, and we will get right back to you with any queries that you have. Great. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. See you, Sandeep. Great interacting with you. And I wish you the best of luck for your future endeavors. See you.